Hello everyone. Today we are here with Liyas Thomas. And Liyas, would you like to go ahead?
Hi, Arun. Well, my name is Liyas. I'm living in Thrissur. I'm one among the core contributors of Hopscotch open source project. And yeah, we'll be talking about some tips on open source, on how to contribute on Hacktober first, and my little bit journey on making Hopscotch project. Thanks
All
for
right.
having me.
That's yep. Glad to have you here. That sounds great. Can't wait to hear about your journey. Would you like to start with how you started off in tech, maybe? Because there's a lot, like a lot of our audience probably are still early in the stages of getting to know tech and learning programming and understanding the whole ecosystem. So
Yeah, I mean, I would say I had a very typical background on, getting into the tech industry and all. So yeah, exactly. I actually started programming, in a serious level programming when I was like at least 16 or so. I mean, just after my high school studies. And
yeah,
yeah, it's a very typical tech stack. Like, I started with Java, HTML, CSS, the very basics of web technologies, and some part of Android technologies as well. So this actually started just after my higher secondary education. And I'm basically a self-learned developer. I
right,
literally everything from Stack Overflow, Google, GitHub, and some developer communities as well. So yeah,
right.
that's how I actually get into tech. But I would say the open source communities and the interaction with open source has been the one of the best things that I have done to get into the mainstream of tech industry. And this actually started when I was in college, in my first year in college. So I'm actually one of the, I studied engineering in APJ Abdul Kalam's first, that university's first batch in 2015 to 2019 batch. And in my college, there was a system where, students, us, give feedbacks to the faculties. It's a pen and paper process. We give grades to our faculties based on their performance, their punctualities and all. And at my college, Nehru College of Engineering and Research Center, Pambadi, we too had a same system. And when I joined in engineering, computer science stream, uh, me and my couple of my friends, we actually thought how cool it would be if we, digitalize all this pen and paper system so that was actually a really hectic task. Like there were at least like 3,000 plus students, and it would take at least more than 2 weeks to, get all these feedbacks from the students. So we created a web app, from which students can log in and, give feedbacks to faculties. So that's how I actually started with open source as a serious contribution engagement with it. Yeah,
So
that's it.
I'm guessing that project went on GitHub. Or
Yeah. So the project is actually called FreeD, FreeD,
okay.
feedback faculty system. And so we actually started the project in our first year. We actually made use of the application in our second year. Starting from second year, and I surely remember using the application in my final year too. But after that, after graduation, uh, by the time of graduation, I sure know that there were at least 10 to 15 colleges using the same application that we made in their campus as well. So that's a really huge feat that we could accomplish. But again, that's an open source project, so we don't have exact analytics on which all colleges are using it, because it's completely open source. And after graduation, I to be honest, I don't know which all colleges are using it. I don't even know the health of that particular project. But it's actually gave a really uh exclusive outlook into the open source stream, and it really kind of like give me a boost on how to make the contributions and engage with the community. And also it was a really good run.
Right. So your suggestion is that we start off small with the problems at home and like, try figuring out small solutions and, start, involving open source along the way.
Actually, yes. I mean, I can't agree more, because while you are at college, you have this enough freedom to work on anything that can be. I mean, it's not just limited to tech, but also it can include your art, your poetry, your any other stuff that excites you. You have this freedom, and I would say I mean, everyone should really make use of that. Like at my college, we had a MTech stream. Like there were seniors who are doing MTech, and it's really funny because it's only about like six or maybe eight students studying in the MTech class, and
Right.
it's kind of like normal thing in Kerala. And they had
Yes.
a very furnished computer lab, for MTech students, only for MTech students. And
Right.
we were so privileged, we were so lucky to have access to that particular computer lab, so that our faculties really motivated us to work on these projects like 3D, or anything that helps the college or the university. And yeah, trying to find out if there is any issue with the current system, or any system that can be modernized, or kind of like solved. And group up with your friends, try to make a solution and come up with a product. And of course, open source can be like a go to market strategy, or you can use open source as a battle test field. Like if you have a product, if you like to test it with a lot of audience, use open source as a medium to communicate with the outer world. So obviously anything that relates to tech, if it's open source, it's so much better to get the first audience. So yeah, totally down for that.
Right. I mean, you just mentioned like open source could be a market strategy, right? So, like, what do you think? Like, how do you think? Like, certain products fit really well in the open source ecosystem. Certain products, like services and stuff, do not really sit in well with open source. Like, I don't think there's like a lot of services that are open source. Like, a few that I can think of is maybe like GitLab, or like there's a very few services that are open source.
Yep.
So what do you think? Like, I saw that you worked at Buy Me a Tea for a brief period of
Yeah.
time. So like, yeah.
Well,
So like,
that's a really funny question. I mean, that's a really important question as well. So just after my graduation in 2019, I was so keen to not to join a corporate environment. I was so blessed to get a lot of job offerings. I mean, I would say I was so blessed to get job offerings from Microsoft, Facebook, and a solution engineering post in Google as well. But I deliberately choose not to go there. Instead, I decided to build my career by myself. And I literally joined a very super early stage startup at Kerala Maker Village. So that's basically Kerala's one of the biggest startup ecosystem. And I joined Buy Me a Coffee, which is a company that's not open source particularly.
sorry, my apologies. I said Buy Me a Tea instead of Buy Me a
Yeah,
Coffee.
that's okay. I mean, so we basically owned a couple of domains, which includes buy me a beer, buy me a coffee, a couple of them. And it totally makes sense because it's a common used way. I mean, it's a common usage in US. So anyways, I joined Buy Me a Coffee, which is actually a YC funded company. I mean, it's actually one of the best YC funded companies in India. So I mean, that's not just about it. Like being in an startup ecosystem, there are a lot of things to learn. Like the Buy Me a Coffee products was actually literally run by me and four of my friends. Like the entire team was like 5 members, that's it. And we served for more than somewhere around 500,000 plus creators. So that's a huge thing. I mean, being a front-end engineer, I have to work on the backend, I have to work on the support, maybe literally every aspect of the product. And getting exposure to all this new tech, new everything related to startups, it actually motivated me to work on something that I can build for myself. So that is why, and that is when exactly I started working on Hopscotch, which actually turned to a $30 million company, and we raised a seed round of $3 million. And at the moment, I'm the CEO of the company. We are building in public. It's an open source project with more than 31,000 plus GitHub stars, and it's actually one of the most popular and growing open source project from India, or even from the Asia. So yeah, there are trade-offs. Like as you asked, why open source? Like it would be much better if it's a closed source project, because there will be little noise and so. So I have a very basic theory. Like every software product can be distinguished to two two categories. One, where the software's source code is not the most valuable asset. I mean, if your product's source code is the most valuable asset, you should not open source your product. Because I mean, I just think about it. If Google was an open source project, there is no value for Google. Like its search algorithm is the most secret thing, or it's so secure that nobody knows what's happening under Google. And there is no value proposition if it's open source project where the source code is the most valuable thing, valuable asset in your software. But on the other side, where if your product or your service or the way you accomplish it, or fix a solution, like just like what Hopscotch did, you can actually take open source as a go-to market strategy. Or you can actually have kind of like build an entire audience from open source bubble. So what it again helps is, if your product's source code is not the most valuable asset of your software, then you should definitely open source, because that will just kind of like help you to reach your extreme goals. So should open source that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like for instance, like if Google open source their product, everyone would exploit and like the SEO
Exactly.
features. And so
Right.
yeah, and I can't think of like yeah, like a lot of for example, some mission critical stuff,
Right.
security vulnerabilities. Yeah, that makes sense. But like, what do you make of like? I'm not used hopscotch that much, but my brief understanding of hopscotch in like in comparison to Postman is that hopscotch is slightly self-contained, as in like it does not rely on a lot of. There is no active services, unlike I'm not sure, but like Postman has a full-fledged. I don't know, like they have. Uh,
Yep.
you, you can share like mock servers and all that is there. So
Uh,
hopscotch is a more
yeah.
uh,
So if you think about hopscotch and Postman comparison, there are a lot of difference. Like so the funny thing is, hopscotch did not started as a alternative to Postman. Like Postman as of now is a very huge enterprise level application, which has a lot of features. Like it's a fully fledged enterprise application. So one down about this is, it's a very cluttered application. So very buggy and a cluttered in a way that it's not accessible for a single developer. Of course, Postman helps to ship a lot of things related to API development for teams, for companies, for organizations with more than, let's say, 5,000 employees. But it actually made it so cluttered that a single developer or a team of five pretty much worthless. Like it's not accessible for them. So or on a night, on that very night when I started this Hopscotch project, I was so frustrated because the Postman app literally crashed my system, because obviously it's an Electron app and it requires at least like 250 MB plus RAM. And I had a 10-year-old PC with me at that point of the time. And yeah, I was, about to test a couple of APIs, but it literally crashed my system. So I was so frustrated on the fact that it's a quite widely used application, but it couldn't, serve my use cases. I literally made a web app. So Postman is a native build, but lately they do have a web application. But at that point of the time, there were no web application to test APIs. And this
Right.
actually happened in 2009, so a couple of years back. But I created a very MVP of the product, like it's a simple web app with a couple of buttons and a drop down to select, APIs and all. And I literally open source it, just like all my other projects. Uh, but the thing is, the next day when I woke up, I actually woke up to this 100 plus notifications from GitHub, Twitter, and dev.to platform from where I used to blog about the Hopscotch app. And by the end of the first week, we literally had more than 5,000 users using the first minimal MVP of Hopscotch. So at that point, I realized that, I mean, it's kind of like a, I was so lucky, I was so privileged to realize there exists this community of developers or engineers who really didn't like the current solutions, not just about Postman, not just about Insomnia or any other alternatives, but they didn't like what it used to be. And Hopscotch being a web app, it literally requires like 2 MB of RAM to get started with the application. Just requires like at least 5 seconds to send the first request. I mean, there were no strings attached. It was so easy. Anybody can make use of it. And yeah, I would say the comparison with Postman and Hopscotch is like a David versus Goliath thing at the moment. But obviously, as we grew our community, so we literally crossed 500,000 users in the past 2 years. So that's a huge feat. And platforms like Postman and Insomnia, they always had a first timers advantage. Like they have been in the industry in this space for the past at least 7+ years, and we are just a new product with less than 2 years of experience. And it was a side project. It's only been 6 months since I switched full time to it. So there are a lot of steps to be done, and I can actually promise you that there will be a point where Hopscotch will be saturated with all the features of Postman. And it would totally make sense for an end user to make the switch from a proprietary service to Hopscotch easily, because Postman being a proprietary service with its closed source and an application which works in the API ecosystem, it's kind of tough because we are dealing with very, very sensitive data. I mean, including our API tokens, our private API endpoints. These are very sensitive data, and an organization would not be happy to have it exposed in an application like in any other application with proprietary service or closed source. But with Hopscotch, they can literally self-host the application under their domain or under their intranet, for their own employees. And by the end of the day, they own their 100% data, their ownership, their policies, everything intact. So that's our current value proposition.
Right. But do you think like it's slightly difficult to build like, end-to-end services with like a concept of users or teams? Because like most of the open source projects, like even Zulip or like Matrix, they have an option of self-hosting, but then self-hosting becomes trouble in itself, right? Like say if Hopscotch tomorrow had uh, like a user or a team feature or something, then it would be up to them to self-host it, right? So like like the question that I'm trying to ask is like, do you think that open source is really well suited for like self-contained application, whereas when it comes to services, even though like for example source like when I think of most of the big SaaS applications that have grown over the past 10 years, like I don't think source code is the primary, like for example like
Exactly.
Stripe, Shopify, I don't think source code is like anyone could have created Shopify. So like where do you think like open source plays a role with, but like proprietary makes sense in some.
Got it, got it. So in terms of plain SaaS applications like Hopscotch or Postman, well, it totally makes sense to self-host an instance, because obviously it's a pain in the ass for the company who are self-hosting the application. But we are not limited to self-host at all, because uh, Hopscotch is a very flexible, very transparent application. Like it's even an MIT license application, because anyone can make an application on top of Hopscotch and turn it to a module of something very bigger than what it is. So the way we kind of approaching this it's a paradox, is something like Hopscotch will have three instances, at least three instances. One is Hopscotch Cloud, which is actually the hopscotch.io domain, where users can create a free profile. They can test their APIs. They can do all the essential stuffs for free. Okay, but there will be a self-hosted hopscotch for mainly targeted for startups, or companies with 5 to 10 members, or let's say about 15 members or so, and they can own the entire data within themselves. And the workflow would be very cool, like it would only take a refresh to get the latest updates from the core. And there won't be enough friction to turn it to like a full-time job to maintain hopscotch, but we are trying to make it as easy as possible. But the thing is, we even have another instance, which is something that we call hopscotch for enterprises. And hopscotch for enterprises is actually one of the, I would say, the most I mean, I can't wait for its launch, because it's something very big. It's a fully fledged enterprise ready tool, which actually comes from the same core, the same open source module, and really targeted for enterprise use cases, like organizations with more than, let's say, around somewhere 500 or 1,000 employees. So again, it's not a self-hostable version. Like a company can get an account, they can onboard entire employees, and they can start migrating from a previous tool like Pushman or Insomnia to Hopscotch in a click, and they get the entire features within their organization, used by all their employees, in couple of minutes. So the Hopscotch for enterprise is actually the service built on top of Hopscotch open source project, but it is not an open source it's not an open source project. Like the enterprise version obviously requires a lot of external features such as SSO and all, which should be something that couldn't be open source, because again, it's really
Okay.
troubles with the security and all. So, and again, privacy is one of the best things about being open source. uh, and as I said, that the three instances really serve the purpose for all use cases. Like we have a completely open source one, we have a self-hostable version, but it's not just limited to that. We have an enterprise cloud, which is not open source, which has a lot of features like team collaboration, unlimited collection sharing, mocking APIs, basically everything that you can expect from a tool like Hopscotch, like from every development lifecycle of an API. So yeah, that's it. That's our plan.
So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Some things are really well suited for open source, and it's possible to create like a business model on top of open source, wherein certain part of it is proprietary, but the core remains open source.
Exactly. The core should be always open source, because the user should be aware of what's happening inside Hopscotch. And that's actually a trust kind of thingy, but it really works out. It have worked out for a lot of companies. So hoping for that.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Coming to Hacktoberfest, like what is your thoughts on Hacktoberfest? Has it impacted you in any way, or has it impacted some really wonderful people that you know, or do you have any thoughts to share on that?
Well, I'm a total fan of Hacktoberfest. Not just about Hacktoberfest, but everything that promotes open source contributions and this kind of culture, which kind of motivates students, especially for students, to start contributing to open source. And personally, I have been attending at least the last 3 Hacktober festivals, just after my graduation. And so being a maintainer of a project like Hopscotch, Hacktober Festival is actually one of the best things that can happen in this ecosystem, because there will be a lot of guys who really wanted to get started with contributing to open source, and they don't have any clue on how to get started with. So especially at Hopscotch, we really made it simple for everyone to get started with Hopscotch and start contributing to it. Like it's a simple process for any level of experience, like whether a newbie or a senior programmer, they can contribute to Hopscotch irrespective of their talents or their expertise in the tech stack. And so personally, I actually started contributing uh, to another open source project in the first ever Hacktober experience that I had. So this actually happened a couple of years ago, actually. And the best thing about organizing such events is that you can actually learn a lot of things from around the world. Like uh you know just think about it. Like, you guys, one from India, one from US, another one from Singapore or China, working on a project with a particular feature or an issue. And by the end of that week or that month, you guys ship a product which kind of like affects 500,000 users. Like, how cool it would be. Or just think about the Mars rover mission. A lot of guys contributed to the Mars rover mission, and their code is actually relying on Mars orbit, trying to land it on that planet. And it's like a win-win for everyone. Like, this is not something that was possible 10 years ago without the open source community interaction and all. And right now we can actually see someone from China and someone from India is contributing to a project made by NASA, who which is an organization in US, and trying to push the humanity forward in non-imaginable ways. Like, this all happened because of events like Hacktoberfest. So I would say everyone should at least try to make an open source contribution. And it couldn't be even that much valuable at the early stages. Like, the first contribution that I made was to a project with 2 or 3 stars in GitHub. But it doesn't matter. And please don't do it for the sake of getting a t-shirt or
Yeah,
any other swags, because it doesn't mean anything for the project or the community. If you have anything to share, do it for the sake of contributing something valuable rather than the swags. Obviously swags help. Like, it's kind of like a token of appreciation. So it really helps. And obviously you can do that at the last week. It's kind of like easy to get a swag. But obviously the first preference should be always for how competitive you can be when compared to a open source project which has, let's say, about. So at Hopscotch we have 140 plus external contributors, and they basically range from Singapore to China to US, from Ukraine, from South Africa. So the Hopscotch project is actually a community driven project, in a way that everyone has their own valuable contribution. And festivals like Hacktoberfest really help to boost that growth. So yeah, that's I mean, I'm totally down for anything that helps open source, and especially for Hacktoberfest, because it's a global event. You
yeah.
guys,
As you said,
right?
yeah, as you said, a lot of people do it for the T-shirt and the incentives, and they don't actually do it. So, as a maintainer, like I've read on Twitter, like a lot of people ranting and complaining about the fact that a lot of people pull up like spam PRs and stuff. And
Yes.
last year, they had to create a lot of GitHub actions so that they could like they could have some filters before they actually open a PR. So as a maintainer, what do you have to say about this?
Well, that's a sad thing, because if something is like, if you can get a t-shirt for free, there will be a point where the community will try to exploit that particular allowance. But I would say, even though there is noise of communities who are uh, participating in Hacktober just because of a free t-shirt, there are literally guys who really love the concept of Oktoberfest, and who are pretty much eager to make the contribution, make the first contribution, being a newbie to the tech industry. So I don't want to generalize anything here, but uh, those who are trying to get started with the tech and open source, they somewhat looks very similar to the spammy guys, because both of them don't have any clue about what they're doing. Like the genuine guys who are pretty new to the industry, they might not have enough knowledge on how to make a PR, how to get it reviewed by any core contributors, or anything like that. And this again applies for a spammer, because he too don't have any agendas, just to like publish a PR, get it merged, and accept the free t-shirt. So being a maintainer, it's a tough process. We have to actually find about, like, who are the spammers, who are the genuine ones. So what we actually trying to do is, we will invite them to our public channels, in Discord, or in our Telegram group, or even in our Slack channels. And we have a one-to-one chat with them, like, what are your expectations about this PR? Or if they are trying to solve an issue which has been reported by the community in our GitHub repo, we will ask them, how are you trying to solve this? Or what is your proposal on a future, or anything that relates to their pull request? And we will try our best to filter out all those tiny improvements, like a typo, like anything that doesn't diminish the quality of the commits. We actually do it manually, because there are obviously some GitHub actions which can automate this, but we can't do that, because there will be genuine newbie guys who are trying to make a PR, and might get spammed because of their little knowledge. But we have to do it manually. And being a maintainer, it's a tough process, but I kind of like enjoy that, because if it's again an opportunity to teach someone how to contribute to open source, how to get into the tech industry. And also I really love that part. But again, the whole maintainers wouldn't have another opinion about it, I guess so.
Right. I think we could go on talking about open source, hopscotch, buy me a coffee for hours and hours, but unfortunately, our time is coming to a close. So, do you have a final piece of advice, like something to say to all us college students out there, with respect to especially how to get started with open source, and how to get rid of those inhibitions, and just go out there and do it. Like,
Yeah, sure. I mean, okay, so you can actually find out like at least a dozen of tips on how to get started with open source and all. I don't want to repeat any one of them. I just want to give some practical advices on how to get started with tech and open source in general. So first thing I would say is, everyone should have at least a minimum skill set. So this shouldn't be a rocket science also. Like anyone with has at least basic knowledge in a single programming language would be just fine. And if you have that, what you have to do is, you have to look up for projects which actually needs help, actively maintained, or something that really helps the community. You can use GitHub search filter for that, sort by their updates, or in by relevance. There are a couple of options. And definitely ask, or interact with the core maintainers of the project. So I have seen a lot of guys who actually just make a PR, out of blue, like without any context. Don't do that. Do have, at least a chat or, an issue, uh, ping the core maintainers on how to do it, because they are very keen to help you guys out. And this again, changes from one project to another. It's not something very common to all the projects out there, but do have an communication with the core members or maintainers, and ask for help. Like everybody is asking for help, and everybody loves to help you guys. So this is one of the best, simplest, practical way to get started with open source and tech in general. And so talking about some advices, well, I'm not kind of like an advice guy, but one very important thing that I want to share is that tech is actually quite a hard thing. Like it's not something everyone can do, but anyone can get into tech with minimal efforts. And the saddest thing is that you won't get instant output. Like the hopscotch project started as a any normal project, and the funny thing is hopscotch is not my first project. Like I had more than a dozen other projects which did not went off. Like it had somewhere like 10 or 20 stars. Nobody doesn't give a shit about it. But the thing is, you have to be very consistent on what you're doing. Do not stop until you kind of like reaches your expected goals. So being consistent is one of the best things about making a progress in open source and tech in general. So be consistent. That's all.
Right. Yep, that makes a lot of sense. Um, Thank you, Liyas, for sharing your time with us, and thank you, folks, for tuning in. Uh, have a great day.